Hello everybody, welcome back to another video for the channel. It's been a while, but I am once again diving into the universe of Life is Strange to ramble a specific topic. And I think it's important to establish this now. This video wasn't planned. This idea came to my mind yesterday, and that is only thanks to a comment I received on my previous Life is Strange video, where I brought up the question on what happened to other characters after the events of Double Exposure and Reunion. I received a comment on that video yesterday as I'm recording this, and it got me thinking about bonus episodes, a concept that Life is Strange has played with a few times, but I'm sure, as we all know, not every Life is Strange game has a bonus episode. Before the Storm had the farewell episode, the original final send-off to Max and Chloe, where absolutely nothing bad happens whatsoever. It's just Max and Chloe being kids, being close friends, and the episode is just a nice, final, funny adventure with Max and Chloe, where, like I said, nothing bad happens at all in this episode. Not a single thing. Nope, nuh-uh. Anyway, True Colors also had a bonus episode, or I guess I should say chapter, that being the Wavelengths chapter, a prequel story that focuses on Steph as the main playable character, where we get to explore her mindset, her psyche, just generally exploring her a little bit more, and how the events from the original game, whether you saved Arcadia Bay or saved Chloe, affected her and Mikey. This scene alone with her and Mikey is probably what makes the chapter worth playing at least once. I remember being disappointed with this chapter when it first came out because, well, it takes place all in one location. Can you blame me for being a little disappointed in that? I was expecting to be able to play as Steph and actually move around a little bit of Haven Springs. This chapter probably is the closest we have to really getting to see how the events of the original game affected other characters in the Life is Strange universe. Other than these two, the only other episode that really counts as a bonus is the Awesome Adventures of Captain Spirit. I don't mind this one. Chris is a fun kid. While we obviously see the issues he and his father have, I don't entirely hate his father either, and it does tie into the events of episode 2 from Life is Strange 2. Then we have the other 3 games which lacks a bonus episode, the original Life is Strange, Double Exposure, and Reunion. So let's try and make up for that in this video. Obviously this is all going to be very opinionated. I don't expect everyone to agree with my ideas, but I believe this is a fun topic of discussion which I don't think is brought up often within the Life is Strange community. What if every Life is Strange game did have a bonus episode? What would the bonus episode be about? Would it be a prequel? Would it be a sequel? Would it be something that takes place during the events of the main game? What character should the episode focus on? Let's have a fun discussion about this very topic. If it was possible, how would I go about adding a bonus episode in Life is Strange, Double Exposure, and Reunion? This video is going to focus on these 3 games that lacks the bonus episode. However, depending on how well this video does, maybe I'll do a follow-up video pitching an extra bonus episode to the games that already had bonus episodes. First things first, let's rewind to the original game. I completely understand why this game didn't have a bonus episode. Obviously, it was the first Life is Strange game. But if we were to have a bonus episode for the original Life is Strange, what could it be about? Who should it focus on? I believe an interesting bonus episode focusing on the original game would be a prequel story that gives us the first month of Max back in Arcadia Bay. She hasn't been in Arcadia Bay for years. She's obviously not spoken to Chloe in a long time. So let's actually see her making her way to Arcadia Bay, arriving at Blackwell Academy, moving into her dorm for the first time, seeing the very first interaction she has with characters like Warren or Kate or even Victoria and Nathan. Her first class with Mr. Jefferson, even if it's just over the phone, and interaction with Max's parents. You know, we don't really get much out of Max's parents throughout any Life is Strange game, which I find, well, strange. So even though they're not physically in person, this could be the chance to at least give us a little bit to get to know Max's parents. I think that would be nice. Obviously throughout the episode we would have some scenes where Max is contemplating whether or not she should contact Chloe now. But then of course she hesitates, she decides not to. She tells herself that she should focus on just getting comfortable being back in Arcadia Bay and focus on her time at Blackwell Academy for now, just to get settled in. So this episode would set up how things are at the start of the original game. How Max and Warren became friends. You could maybe add a comical scene where Max has already clocked in that Warren has a crush on her. A scene establishing her relationship with Kate and possibly already seeing Kate being made fun of or harassed by Victoria and her friends. Nathan just being a cunt to everyone around him. So the whole episode will be jumping through time. We'll be going through the entire first month of Max back in Arcadia Bay, attending Blackwell Academy, getting adjusted to her new life, and contemplating whether or not she should get back in touch with Chloe, or when she should contact Chloe. And I believe the best way this episode would conclude would be on the day where the events of the original game kicks off. So it's Monday morning, Max is getting ready to head off to school. Max won't see it, but the player may notice a certain blue butterfly passing by her as she's starting her day. Maybe it's flying around Blackwell Academy as she's entering the building. And speaking of, as she enters the building, maybe a certain truck pulls up to the parking lot. And just as Chloe gets out of the truck, that's when the episode fades to black and cue the credits. So yeah, it's a simple idea for the original game. I admit that this episode wouldn't really add much to the overall story. We would basically just get to see Max starting her journey in Arcadia Bay in Blackwell Academy. Her first time meeting Warren, Kate, Victoria, Nathan, Jefferson. Hell, possibly even David would make a brief appearance. And the main focus is to just see Max settling in and trying to get used to being back in Arcadia Bay, with the very last part of the episode taking place on the start of the same morning where the events of the main game kicks off. It would be short, simple, and just an extra addition to Life is Strange to see these characters and how they were before the events of the main game kicked off. Now, what about Double Exposure? What would the bonus chapter be for this game? I believe the interesting choice for this game's bonus episode would be a mixture of a prequel while also seeing some of the events from Double Exposure's plot from a different point of view. So this bonus episode would focus on Diamond. Like I said, it would be a prequel to begin with. We will basically see, from Diamond's point of view, Max starting her new life in Caladon. Hell, the very first scene could be Diamond in a photography class, with Max being the teacher. One of the many missed opportunities in Double Exposure, in my opinion, was the fact that we never got to have a scene where Max was a teacher. Throughout the whole game, we're basically told that, yeah, Max is a teacher, that's why she's here in the first place. She is a teacher, she's not just taking photographs. So the beginning of this chapter would be rewinding before the events of Double Exposure, where we get to see Max's first class being the teacher. We interact with a few characters during the lesson, and at the end of the class we even have a scene similar to what we had with Max in the original game after she left the classroom to go to the girls' bathroom. And just in general, we would get to see the world from Diamond's point of view, Diamond's perspective, going about a regular day, dealing with lessons, dealing with school life, dealing with Vin and the Abraxas shit. Give us some of the first interactions with characters like Max, Moses, Reggie, Safi, and allow the player to see what these characters are like well before the events of the main game kicks off. Speaking of, how long was Max in Caladon before the events of Double Exposure kicked off? Was she there for long? I think she's only there for a few months before the events of Diamond Exposure. I combined Diamond's name with Double Exposure. Life is Strange, Diamond Exposure, coming soon. We'll finally get to see what Diamond's powers are, and for some reason, we are seeing a lot more of Diamond than anyone probably expected to see. Remember that scene in Life is Strange 2 where Hailey just casually walks past Sean topless? Diamond's going to be doing that throughout the whole game. Diamond Exposure, just how you imagined it. Good God, I'm so fucking retarded sometimes. As I was saying, I don't think Max was in Caladon long before the events of Double Exposure kicked off. Let's jump forward in time a little bit. We would then have basically the beginning of Double Exposure's plot, but once again we are watching it from Diamond's point of view. It's unfortunate knowing that realistically we probably will never learn what Diamond's powers are, or if we finally do get to see her powers in action, it's not going to be for a very long time. I feel like even if there is a potential chance of us seeing another Life is Strange game, that ain't happening for a long time. And even if one's guaranteed within the next few years, that doesn't mean that Diamond's guaranteed to be a part of it. And while it obviously wouldn't make sense to introduce her powers within this chapter, I think we can definitely tease the powers starting to manifest throughout the events of this chapter. Like I said, we've now jumped forward to the beginning of Double Exposure's plot, but we're focusing on Diamond's point of view. And I think we could once again mirror the scene from the original game at the very beginning, where maybe Diamond had a nightmare sequence. Maybe we don't even get to see it, but whether it's her in class or her at the start of her day before she goes to class, Diamond wakes up from a nightmare. Maybe it could happen while she's at the Snapping Turtle talking to Reggie. Diamond blacks out for a few seconds from Reggie's point of view, but from her point of view, Diamond was gone for a little while. And she doesn't even know why. She doesn't really have an explanation. Once she comes to, and she realizes she's back in the Snapping Turtle talking to Reggie, she's a bit confused. She doesn't really understand what happened. And just like any other dream, she can't even remember what the dream was about. She just knows that it was something strange. Again, we can't really properly introduce the powers in this chapter, in my opinion. But I think it's okay to plant the seeds during the events of this story, because I'm confident that throughout the events of Double Exposure, Diamond's powers were manifesting. They were starting to wake up. It wasn't just the post-credit scene at the end of the story. The scene at the end of Chapter 5 with Max talking to everyone in the Snapping Turtle, I'm convinced that by that point, Diamond's powers has already manifested. They have already triggered. Maybe Diamond doesn't fully understand how to use the powers yet, but by that point in the story, I'm 100% confident Diamond had her powers. And this bonus episode, one of its main purposes will be to highlight the fact that throughout the events of Double Exposure, Diamond's powers were starting to manifest. They were waking up, and she was having weird dreams, weird nightmare sequences in her head, connecting to her powers. Just like Max early on in Chapter 1, just before Safi is killed, Diamond has a similar scenario happen to her. She gets a headache, she gets some pain. As suggested earlier, maybe she blacks out for a few seconds while talking to Reggie at the Snapping Turtle, or while she's in the classroom, mirroring the scene from the original game with Max. The point is, as we get to the beginning of the main story, this chapter we would get to see that Diamond's powers are also starting to trigger. Alongside that, I would also think it would be interesting to technically have two playable characters in this bonus chapter. Since we would be playing as Diamond during the events of Double Exposure by this point, let's play as Diamond in both timelines. Let's say this chapter is just as long as Steph's chapter from True Colors. The beginning segment would be the prequel stuff. Diamond meeting Max for the first time, seeing her as her new teacher, interacting with the other characters we will meet in Double Exposure itself, and maybe something to tease her powers starting to manifest without her realizing. Then the second part of the episode would be when we are caught up with the beginning of the main game. Just like Max, she gets some headaches, she feels some pain, just before Safi is shot and killed. With this part of the chapter coming to a close just as Max has jumped into the alternate timeline for the first time. And while Diamond isn't really aware of what's going on, her powers are starting to wake up now, and thanks to these powers, she feels something. When Max first travelled from the dead world to the living world. It's basically the same idea that I suggested regarding Alex in my previous Life is Strange videos. Even though she had nothing to do with the events of the original game, I like to think that because of her powers, Alex would have sensed something or felt something when Max fused the two timelines together at the end of Double Exposure. I'm basically thinking the same idea here for when Max first transports from one timeline to the other, and even though Diamond's powers haven't fully manifested yet, they are starting to become active, and because of that, Diamond is able to feel a strange feeling in her head the same time that Max travelled from one timeline to the other for the first time. Obviously, she has no idea what it was. From her point of view, it was just a random headache or just a weird gut feeling for a few seconds, and then she just carried on going about her day, possibly talking to Vin about the Abraxas shit. Speaking of, that could be where we are for the third segment of this chapter. We focus on Diamond from both timelines, dealing with Abraxas, dealing with Vin. We're somewhere in chapter 3 of Double Exposure's plot by this point. And again, while we potentially get some hints that Diamond is starting to become aware that something is strange happening around Caledon, her focus on Abraxas and Vin distracts her from whatever this feeling is that she keeps having. Which then leads us to the final segment of this bonus chapter. Towards the end of Double Exposure's plot, Max has fused the two timelines together. Two versions of Diamond from the two timelines are fused into one. And again, while we don't get to actually see what her powers are, this would be the moment where Diamond would absolutely realize that she has powers. All these strange feelings, headaches, dreams that she's been having throughout this chapter has finally started to make sense. It's because her powers were starting to wake up. She doesn't understand why she has these powers, and she obviously still doesn't understand the context of what the fuck happened at Caledon regarding Max and Safi. But she knows that they had something to do with it, and when the two versions of Diamond fused together, that was the last trigger her powers need to fully manifest. The chapter would come to an end here. Possibly we could still chuck in the scene at the end of the main game again, with Safi recruiting Diamond to join the Brotherhood of Mutants. Anyway, that's my pitch for the bonus episode of Double Exposure. Starting off as a prequel, focusing on Diamond at the beginning of her school year, meeting Max for the first time as she has started her new life at Caledon, becoming a teacher. While we still wouldn't learn exactly what her powers are, throughout the chapter, Diamond's powers would start to manifest, they would start to take form. A portion of the episode would be taking place during the events of Double Exposure itself, playing as both Diamonds in both timelines. And by the end of the chapter, the two timelines have merged. The two Diamonds have fused together, and that was the moment where her powers fully manifested and Diamond completely realizes what's going on with her. Concluding with the scenes at the Snapping Turtle, and again potentially the post-credit scene as well. Moving to the third and final game for this video, Life is Strange Reunion. The bonus episode / chapter idea I have is actually two. I couldn't decide which one to focus on, so I'm going to just talk about both. One serving as a little bit of a prequel, while also just explaining what the hell a certain character was doing during the events of Reunion. And the second idea being an epilogue, focusing on two characters in particular. This idea is heavily based on the comment I brought up at the start of the video from Maxime Midorian. I hope I said that right. So, the first idea focuses once again on Diamond. As we all know at this point, Reunion was not the original plan after Double Exposure. We were supposed to get a very different Life is Strange game after Double Exposure. And to my understanding, said game would have focused on Max still being in the story and Diamond also being a main focus, finally learning what her powers are, and both her and Max would have been the playable characters for this game. To my understanding, that is what the original plan was after Double Exposure. Things changed, mostly for the best, let's not kid ourselves here, and instead Chloe returned. But this resulted in Diamond being shafted. She left with Safi at the end of Double Exposure, and even though Safi returned, Diamond was nowhere to be seen. What happened to her? Where is she? Why didn't she come back? All we get is the one phone call towards the end of the game, and we obviously don't really get much answers from said phone call. So even though it's not a whole game dedicated to her, let's at least have this bonus episode dedicated to Diamond where we get to catch up with her, see what she's been doing, and hopefully answer a few important questions that I'm sure a lot of players would have regarding this character. First and foremost, yes, finally, we would learn what her powers are. During this bonus episode, we would get to see what Diamond's powers are. It's very open-ended, to be honest, on what you can do with this hypothetical bonus chapter focusing on Diamond. Reunion takes place a year after the events of Double Exposure, so what the hell was Diamond doing throughout that whole year? We do know for a fact that Diamond and Safi was looking for other superpowered individuals, and they came very close to finding characters like Alex and Daniel. So is it possible for Diamond to maybe be somewhere around these locations from Life is Strange 2 or True Colors? Would it be possible for this episode to feature at least one or two characters from either of those two games? Possibly. Why wasn't Diamond with Max and Chloe during the events of Life is Strange Reunion? While that was happening, she was somewhere else having her own little adventure, and a few familiar faces were a part of her story. Instead of it being a character from another game, how about Gwen? Just like Diamond, Gwen is gone after Double Exposure. So like I suggested in my Returning Characters series for Life is Strange, even though it's not a full game, how about during this bonus episode, Diamond has her own little adventure, and during said adventure, she reunites with Gwen. These two characters don't really interact much in Double Exposure, so let's make up for that. Again, there's a lot of ideas you could really do with this concept. What was Diamond doing during the time gap between Double Exposure and Reunion, and what was she doing during the events of Reunion? Why wasn't she here? Make a bonus episode revealing that. Since it's only one episode, you're limited on what you can do, sure, but to at least make up for the fact that Diamond probably never will get her own Life is Strange game, and like I mentioned earlier, we probably won't ever actually get to see her powers as well. A bonus episode could have been the perfect solution for that, to at least wrap up that part of the Life is Strange universe. Bonus idea number 2 is an epilogue heavily inspired by the comment left by Maxi Midorian. This bonus episode would be very fan servicey and dedicated to us finally seeing Arcadia Bay again to catch up with some of the characters. I don't think we should play as Max or Chloe for this. They will still be in the episode, but I don't think we should focus on Max and Chloe. Instead, I want this episode to focus on 2 other characters from the original game, and towards the end of the episode, it will be a nice happy reunion with Max and Chloe. These 2 characters are Warren and Kate, and I've got an idea here that we've never seen in Life is Strange before. We get to choose which character we want to play as, either Warren or Kate. Either way, the premise of the episode would still be the same. So if we choose to play as Warren, we get to catch up with him, see what he's been up to since the events of the original game. I'm going to briefly put my tinfoil hat on and theorize that if any character from the original game would still be trying to figure out what happened after the events of Double Exposure's ending, it would be him. Yes, I know, it's established that over time, everyone else just forgot. However, even with that in mind, it's not like everyone forgot immediately. At the end of Double Exposure, when everyone's in the Snapping Turtle, all the characters remembers the events from both timelines taking place. So there's at least a brief period of time where the memories from both timelines are fused together in one person. Is it impossible to say that someone like Warren wouldn't leave like maybe a video message for himself or some text on the wall or on a whiteboard, basically trying to remind him that this definitely happened? And I'm not saying this would be a major point in the episode. We would just see a few details here and there throughout the episode that highlights that Warren was trying to figure out / understand what happened. Anyway, let's remove the tinfoil hat because we're done with that. I've got a whole video dedicated to this topic, focusing on Warren and other characters, and I've brought this up in another Life is Strange video as well, talking about returning characters for the series. So if you want to hear more about me rambling about that topic, specifically focusing on Warren especially, go check out Returning Characters in Life is Strange. I have a whole segment basically dedicated to Warren. Anyway, outside of that, we're catching up with Warren. We see him living his life, just going about his day-to-day activities, and oh look, he's in Arcadia Bay. He meets up with Kate, he and Kate interact with each other, they catch up because they haven't seen each other for a while. I know they weren't really close friends in the original game, but I like to think that Warren and Kate did keep in touch after the original game. Even if they don't stay as close friends, I think it's still possible that these 2 characters would keep in touch with each other and occasionally meet up. And that is the very thing that they're doing. They're meeting up, catching up with one another, and they decide to head on over to the Two Wells Diner. And then as they enter the diner, oh shit, Max and Chloe are here. Warren and Kate obviously haven't seen these two characters in many years. And since we're playing as Warren, he's the one that gets to actually talk to and interact with Max, Chloe, and since she's probably there, Joyce. Maybe we could even toss in David being there as well, why the hell not? Again, it's a very fan servicey episode. And during Warren's version of the episode, maybe during his conversation with Max, something about the storm or Chloe's death, the events of obviously Double Exposure and Reunion comes up. And it makes Warren curious. Even though Warren doesn't have the full context of it, you as the player needs to decide if Warren should just move on or still try to understand what happened with the Fuse timeline shenanigans. During this scene, Max could also comment on how she thinks Moses and Warren would get along very well. You know, like Max will just say, you know what, Warren? You should meet my friend Moses. I think you and him would have a lot in common. And I think the most significant thing for Warren would be to finally establish that he's moved on from Max. Warren was able to finally move on. And speaking of, that could be another thing that comes up in this episode. Maybe Warren has a partner. Whether or not they actually make an appearance in the episode, maybe that's something that comes up during the episode, that Warren is dating someone. If you choose to play as Kate in this episode, the episode would obviously begin from her point of view. We get to catch up with her, and in contrast to Warren, Kate has nothing to do with the Fuse timeline conspiracy theory stuff. She's just living her own life. Possibly a mention of Victoria could come up during this. And after just catching up with her a little bit on her own, again, she goes to meet up with Warren. We're playing as her this time. Happy reunion with Max and Chloe. And this time it's Kate that gets to have the major focus, reuniting with Max and Chloe, talking to them, catching up with them, some mentions of what Max has been up to. Max could mention Moses, saying that she thinks that Kate and Moses would get along very well, just to have that mention of him regardless if it's focused on Warren or Kate. During the episode, Max and Chloe talks about staying in Arcadia Bay for a little bit and then leaving again to reunite with some other old friends. Steph and Mikey being the best examples for that. And yeah, again, just a very simple fan service, happy ending episode. And that's it. It honestly doesn't have to be that long. It doesn't have to be much of a story either. Just a victory lap, I guess, of the Max and Chloe saga for Life is Strange. Not everything is concluded in this episode, but since it has been stated multiple times, Max and Chloe's saga is over in Life is Strange. Even if Life is Strange continues, chances are Max and Chloe aren't appearing again, and to be honest, as much as I love those characters, it's probably for the best. If we do get the chance of another Life is Strange game, I think it does need to be just a fresh start. New cast of characters, new location, new powers. You could maybe have an odd character or two show up from a previous game. But again, I've got a whole trilogy of videos dedicated to that very topic, so I'm not going to ramble any more about that here. Anyway, yeah, that pretty much does it for this video. That is the bonus episodes for Life is Strange, Double Exposure, and Reunion, or at least my pitch for a bonus episode for each game. Let me know what you think, and like I said earlier, if the video does well, if I just generally feel like doing it, maybe I'll do a follow-up video talking about the very same topic, focusing on the other 3 Life is Strange games, despite the fact that they already had a bonus episode. Why settle for 1 bonus when you can have 2, or maybe even 3 bonus episodes?